right, guys, welcome to episode 17. Today I am joined by Zach Zimmer. Zach, I want to compliment you. Watching your speech at RubeCon gave me and Katie maybe comfort or permission to know that it's not always going to be pretty, but you can get out on the other side. And when we were on the flight home, I listened to one of your podcasts, and as much as you hear the quote, it's more about the journey than the destination. I think Katie and myself have both had a big shift just being around a lot of you guys at RubeCon. So I just want to let you know that you have had an impact, even though we've only had a few conversations.
Hey, thanks. I really appreciate. I get like an email or a Facebook message like once or twice a week off the podcast, and it means a lot. That's why I sent one today to a guy. I listened to his podcast. I was like, hey, today's episode really hit me, and I think that really helps because a lot of the stuff that we do when we get into this kind of space, right, we're not getting paid by sponsors. We're just doing it because we enjoy to do it, and we hope that it is making an impact and we're getting feedback that keeps us motivated to keep doing it, right?
Yeah. And for everyone who hasn't met Zach or heard of him, he's a real estate investor. He knows a lot of people in the industry. He's lent money, he's done his own projects. And a big thing that he focuses on is passive income. But obviously, Zach, life hasn't always been passive. So for everyone who doesn't know you, where were you at, let's say in your early 20s when you first entered the working world? Were you an entrepreneur? Were you working a job? How do you kind of go about it?
Yeah, so I was brought up the typical, I guess that the typical upbringing, the normal rat race, go get your education. I had a father that had a business degree. My grandfather had a business degree, right? Everybody went to school, and my grandfather started a business that my father then, purchased him out of, and I went, that was the path to take. And I went and I got a manufacturing engineering, kind of a hybrid between an engineering and a manufacturing management role. And got that degree, and I went to work, and I ran around companies and had that get up at 5 a.m. and first one's into the office and hustle. And where do you want me to travel? What do you want me to do? And bled for these companies. And I just remember, back in, this would have been like 2004 when I was trying to come back to Ohio from Michigan, and I was applying and interviewing. And I just remember like my spiel was, hey, no wife, no kids, like wherever you want me to do, wherever you want me to go, nothing's going to stop me from being where I want to be in my career and my life. And at that time, right, I think right, the goal or the mindset was, oh man, if I can make 100 grand, I'm gonna be Don Johnson, who you probably don't even know, Miami Vice Don Johnson. But in the 80s, like that was the guy. He drove a Ferrari Testarossa and looked real cool, and you just thought like that was it. And yeah, and that's what I was after, was building myself up in manufacturing companies was kind of my background in engineering. And hey, I want to make six figures. I want to be a plant manager. I want to be a director of operations, a vice president of operations. And those are the guys that I looked up to and aspired to up until about probably 20. So I first came across real estate in 2012. So it probably took me about 2 years to 2 to 3 years to change my mindset to be like, oh, wow, that is not what I want. That is not the life of working 50, 60 hours a week. You're on your phone Saturday nights at 10 o'clock because of a plant issue or a shutdown. And, those guys that just live their life until they're finally pushed away, right? Those guys are all brushed off from those companies as they're hitting their upper 50s or 60s, and nope, we're done. We got younger blood, cheaper blood. We don't need you anymore, and then they don't know what to do.
Yeah. So did you kind of have people around you outside of your job that had that mindset, or was it more through maybe you were watching stuff online or maybe you were reading the books? Like where did you first get that new info that maybe this isn't the way I need to go?
So when I came down to Ohio, and that was 2005, from Daimler Chrysler, and was working in supply chain. And a good friend of mine came down a year later. and he ended up in a different group, a different supply chain group in Timken, but we're close friends. And he had started to hear from guys in his department about buying these rentals, these Akron, Northeast Ohio, just phenomenal returning rentals. He's buying them for 20, 25,000, 30,000. They're renting for 900. And I just remember, I don't know if I ended up getting into it from hearing of their successes. And I don't know if it was before I bought my first two or sometime in that first year or so. And I heard my friend Marcelo say, like, he's tired of working so hard at the company. Like, if he wants a raise, he's just going to go buy another rental property. And I remember that hit me as like, because that's what we lived for, right? March, our performance review, our bonus. Oh, we got an 8% raise. Oh my goodness, that's additional money that we're not spending that we get to go do something cool with. And I just remember him saying, like, oh, I go buy another house. I'm going to cash flow $400 a month, five, whatever, 4 to 5. And like, boom, there's my raise. And hey, next month, if I want another raise, I'll go buy another property. And I think that was the start of kind of like, oh, I can dictate my income. And I had never had a sales role. That wasn't right how I was brought up. And so that mentality, because a lot of people would say, oh, of course, in sales, right, you make your own destiny, you go out and hustle, right? That was foreign to me. And I wasn't, and I still am not today. I'm not a salesman. I'm not a big extroverted salesman. And so it was eye-opening to me of one little nugget, like, okay, I can do that. I can make my own destiny. And back in 2012, I don't know when Bigger Pockets started, but I certainly wasn't on it. I didn't know about it. There was not good education out there besides like the sleazy sales conferences of signing you up in the back of the room with credit cards and charging. All right, hey, this is a $300 event, and when you're at the 300, we did go to one, me and a buddy, but like there was the free event, and then there was the $1,200 event, and then at the $1,200 event was the $30,000 upsell, and we laughed at it, but that's what was out there then. And so, how did my development really start? I mean, the traditional books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was a big one that actually I was given when I was like 19 years old from a guy trying to pull me into a multi-level marketing business.
You didn't read it then?
And I read it. I remembered seeing or getting some of the parables in there. I think particularly one where like he would melt like the rubber off the toothpaste containers, and you would get the nickel that's on the inside, and it was worth more than. And like I just remember like some lessons in there, and I tried to talk to my mom and stepdad about it. And my stepfather worked at General Motors. He's a laborer out there and things in skilled trades. My mother worked in retail. And I just remember like trying to bring some of that up and talk about it. And it just, it was brushed off as a joke, right? What do you,
Yeah.
stupid books or weird, that little story. And, and so I remembered it back, as I started getting into real estate in 2012 and, got it back in front of me. I think I moved on to some of his other books that had come out. I know I did. I'm not sure exactly on the timing, but Retire Young, Retire Rich, Tax-Free Wealth.
Yeah, it looks like you got a few up there.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 4 or 5 that are his Rich Dad Poor Dad advisors that are all phenomenal, and that just started to help change that mindset. But I think the next biggest things was getting let go and losing 6-figure income in 10 minutes. And that was a huge crying. I mean, we had a new child. We had just
Yeah.
built a
So
new
what was that
house.
day like? Because I think I've met a lot of people that can share about wins really easy, but when it comes to the losses, like no one can admit that, yeah, there are nights where maybe you're having a panic attack or you don't know what you're going to do the next day, or maybe you're not sleeping because you're planning the whole night. Like, what was that first maybe 2 or 3 days like?
So here's the funny thing, private equity is, has no heart. And so I had left the safe haven where I had been for 8 years, the Timken company, and taking an opportunity, good opportunity, you know, to develop myself, get into a different atmosphere. And it was they offered to relocate us because it was an hour away in Cleveland. So we moved, we built a house. We had a child while we were building that house. We were moving into that house, and I was traveling for the company doing continuous improvement training. So my background at Timken really switched from engineering into lean manufacturing, continuous improvement, operational excellence. And we were leading an event, a week-long event down in Kentucky, where the frontline leadership, supervisors, area managers had all driven to this hotel, kind of central to 3 or 4 different plants. And we were leading an event that week called, you know, the Alaris operating system, our lean operating model that the frontline leadership was going to roll out with my help. And I remember, you know, having breakfast in the hotel that morning, and I got a text on my BlackBerry back then from the HR director, like, "Hey, can you stop in my office when you get in this morning?" And I'm like, "Hey, Drew, like, I'm in Lewisport. We're doing Frontline Leadership Academy this week." And he was like, "Oh, well, you know, call me at the end of the day." Right. So
Did you have
committed
a
to
clue?
send.
Like, were you anxious at this point, or were you just like, this is weird?
So at 2 weeks prior, at a similar frontline leadership academy that I was part of, there was an incident that happened, and I thought this was related to that incident. There was an incident with a supervisor and just some behaviors that weren't professional, right? And so I thought he was following up about that. And so, I mean, we had 50, 60 people that have driven to this hotel. And that weekend, because of missing earnings, that's when leadership made the decision to cut a whole bunch of headcount, including the entire Alaris continuous improvement system, not knowing that there was a boot camp starting up on Monday. So, end of the day, an HR manager from a local plant was there. And it still made sense because he's the HR manager from the plant where that other guy was employed. And he's like, "Hey, yeah, we got to go call Drew. Let's go up to your hotel room." And so, yeah, I'm like, "Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about so and so, what he did at the bar or whatever it was." And we get on that call, and again, I'm still right, everything's awesome. Yeah, let's go. And that's when Drew tells me, "Hey, yeah, the Alaris operating system's been eliminated. Your role's been eliminated." And I'm just like, "What?" Like,
And the
I
other
just
guy's like sitting
submitted.
next to you.
And so the HR manager from the plant was sitting there right next to me with a packet, like things that would, you know, to give me like my severance papers and all these things to sign. And I'm just like, because I had just submitted like a $20,000 expense report for all the moving costs, the closing costs for the house, all these things that were covered as part of the relocation plan. And I'm just like, are they not going to cover that? Like, did I just clear out all my leftover cash and now we have nothing and no job and a brand new house and brand new baby? And they did, you know, no, your expense reports are covered. You've got a month of severance because I'd only been there like 8, 9 months at this point.
Yeah.
And so I remember calling my wife, and she was still living in her parents' basement where we lived while we built that house, and had a baby living in their basement. And you know, we had 2 dogs, brand new baby, and I'm just like, "Hey, this is what happened." And I'm pretty sure she had tears too. I know for sure I did. Like, what is going to happen here? And you know, at that point she was still working, but you know, boom, that was 60%, 65% of our income just gone. Right, that we had one leg under our table. Well, we had her little leg too, but the big leg was gone, and that table's now is ready to go. And so, yeah, it was a rough night. I remember going down to the bar and, you know, dinner or whatever. You know, I don't think I didn't go out to dinner with the group, but like I remember going down to the bar and like all these supervisors and everybody's hanging out there. And I'm like, "Hey guys, well, everything I told you and taught you today, we were just kidding." And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "The Alaris operating system is just, it's gone, it's deleted history." And they were all pissed, right? You know, they left from their jobs to all this stuff, and they just got, you know, force fed stuff that they don't really care about for a day. And so they were like, "This is ridiculous. This is, I can't believe they just did this to you." And so I remember getting on LinkedIn and like, bam, messaging a ton of people on LinkedIn. And within that first 24 hours before I even got home, I remember like quite a few messages and people like, okay, hey, I'm sending a couple of messages to my colleagues because you got great experience and the degree and all these things. And so by the time I got home, I think I was feeling pretty better. And yeah, I ended up landing basically same compensation by the time, probably before my severance even ran out. So it was a clean landing, but it was that first warning shot that, man, when you have a W-2 and nothing else on the side, that thing can be gone in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it means nothing to, boom, they'll just cut you and it's gone. And now what are you going to do?
And how different did you start operating even on a daily basis now that you have this new, let's call it understanding? Was it more like I'm looking around for more opportunity? I'm actually like more willing to jump because the one thing I heard you say, and everyone I think in sales does this, so it's funny you did it, that I'm let off. Now it's time to do a ton of outreach. You had that instinct of like, there's no, because someone could have been like, oh, I'm sad. I don't want to message anyone and hide in a corner, but you immediately kind of still went right back out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't say that was the whole pivotal point of my mindset, but it was probably, you know, one of three or four, and the other two came along within the next year or two of both my father and my father-in-law retiring from the perfect, the perfect American life, right? One of them came up through their own business. My dad, who he bought my grandfather's business, and he did what he was supposed to do, right? He worked till he was 60 and put aside a big nest egg, and they were going to travel, spend their last 30 years, 25 years, travel, travel, travel. And boom, his knuckles, right? His arthritis starts taking his physical body, the neck, the shoulder, the hands. He has just been, had physical maladies, physical issues, when this was what you're supposed to get to. You're supposed to get to these golden years of you've got the money and now you have the time to go live this life. But without the health, what good were the other two? And even worse, my father-in-law, he did the same thing. He worked for 30 some years, Marine, fire captain of municipal fire departments, and then a fire environmental health and safety director at Goodyear Tire here in Akron. And he retires, and within 18 months, 20 months, wheelchair bound from systemic scleroderma from Camp Lejeune in the Marines. And same thing, right? They got the nest egg. They have the time. He worked the healthiest 30 years of their life and put aside. And again, what good is it without the health? And so those things hit me along with the whole loss of the job that quick, and reading Kiyosaki's and then Tim Ferriss's 5 Hour Work Week. And I was just like, no, you got to get out of this rat race as soon as possible, because right, our health isn't guaranteed, even if we take care of ourselves. Right. I mean, there's just so many things out there that can rob you those last 20, 30 years. Start living your life now.
And so if someone's in that right now, let's say maybe they lost that job or they're seeing that, man, my parents retired, but they're not actually retired like it should look like. Was it hard for you to see opportunity, even though you maybe realized one system was wrong? What about the next skill set, which is like actually scaling the rentals? Was that something you had to ask for help for, or did you kind of tie those two together?
No, I mean, there was no help still, or at least there wasn't that I had found to help me scale. It was all through my own reading and experience. I mean, Bigger Pockets was there as a forum, right? I remember just losing hours and hours and hours and weekends to reading all these examples of what people are doing and how they're winning and how they're losing. Um, and so, yes, I'd say in terms of tactical things, and I was learning some of that stuff on there while I was just consuming, book after book after book of more of mindset and high level macro, while just, experiencing the micro issues by doing and by, reading forums on bigger pockets. But there weren't the good coaching or education platforms like there excuse me like there are today. There's a lot of different options out there, and you can get referrals and find some programs. But yeah, I mean, it was all by doing and just networking and finding the right bank, finding the right agents, finding the contractor that I did 60, 70 homes with, who, I mean, without him, who knows how far I would have gotten, because I had liens and lawsuits and just, challenges until I found the right one.
Yeah. Do you think that, because obviously you went the traditional college route, you had, like you said, your degree was a thing that you were reaching out to people with. If someone, like, let's say Zach was 23 this year in 2024, how do you think you would go about education with the knowledge you have now?
Oh, so then hindsight, right? To know everything.
Like, if you
Right.
knew everything you knew now and then woke up Freaky Friday tomorrow and you're 23-year-old Zach living in this year, what kind of education or maybe guidance do you think you would go for if you're just getting started?
Oh, I mean, you definitely, there's a benefit for local to find local groups or people locally in coaching to be able to sit down with or go to meetups. The remote stuff, I think so. Remote has always been this uh big arduous thing to me, like people that invest remotely, actively, right? I invest remotely but as a passive partner. To invest remotely as an active partner, just given the experiences I've had, just gives me heartburn to, because now, if I have an issue going on now, I can just, if I want to, I can drive 10 minutes and go by the house and go up to the house and see it. Like when you have that going on, 500 miles, 1,800 miles away, and you're okay, the property manager is going to charge you or this or that. And then, oh, well, we don't know what's going on. We're just going to have to serve notice and we'll be in court in, 60 days. And it's, and then I hear these experiences of people investing remotely that are having similar issues of their properties aren't getting rented and they have a bad property manager, but they're in a contract. And, oh, yeah, they were making 175, $250 a month, but then hey, their first turnover, $3,800, paint, carpet, property manager upcharge. It just,
Yeah.
I would, I know it's tough, but like you need to have, you need to move to an area where you can invest locally, or get boots on the ground, because investing remotely as a turnkey is not going to get you to FI. It's going to be oh, it's different than the market. It's a side thing. So I mean, that's one of the things that for me, in hindsight, it was so phenomenal that I was here. But if I wasn't here, I would want to get to an area like this where you can get cash flow. I would want to find the right folks that I can get with, that, what people tell me a lot is they like how I talk about everything, right? I don't hide anything. I don't hide how much cash is coming in. I don't hide how much I've lost in bad investments. I don't hide anything. And you want to find a guy like that who, will talk to you as much about the losses as the wins, because what's more important, like learning how to make 15%, 20%, or learning how to not lose 100%, right?
Not lose 100 for sure.
It takes a lot of 15 and 20 percenters to make up for 100% loss. And, I've got a lot of hindsight on things that I've done that have lost me, 100% or damn close.
Yeah, and I guess the second part of that question I'm curious is, like, now that obviously I think you've done a good job of building a network outside of also Akron, like obviously Dustin, a lot of the guys you met up with at RubeCon and other conferences. Do you think it's important, even if like you're going to stay in a local market, like I'm going to invest or I'm going to work here in Ohio, to still know of people in other markets? Do you think that's of value?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing that now because I just want a big life, right? I want a big network. I think the more people that you are connected with that are doing similar things is obviously going to benefit you to understand how they're doing, what they're doing different, different. Yeah, like different collection systems. I mean, I was just talking with Dustin the other day, understanding who he's using for collections, and just a larger network to get best practices and be part of a big wealth of knowledge than just your own little niche.
Yeah. Because that was overwhelming for me to leave there and just see that there were, I mean, I probably could count 50 different ways people are making well over six figures a year at that conference. And
Mhm.
it's just all different. So how have you, or maybe how have you not avoided the shiny object syndrome throughout all of this? Because I think that's something a lot of us fall for is, we have this great thing working, but then something comes in the peripheral and you just want to chase it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got that podcast episode on losing $14 million, which, which is 850,000 times 15% for the next 15 years. But yeah, I mean, I've lost damn near close to $1 million in shiny objects. And, I was just talking about it with someone actually yesterday. And yeah, I mean, my issue was nothing bad. I had never had a bad investing experience. Everything I had touched became silver or gold, and I'd never been lied to. Everything people had told me, they did and came true or close to true. And it was just unfortunate as I was pivoting away from active ownership, right? I had over 50 some single families. I had a lot in hard money lending here. And I was like, hey, what's this private equity space all about? These limited partner syndications. And I want to get into those. Man, those are sexy. Those are cool. Here's a golf course winery in New Jersey. Here's self storage, daycare centers. Here's all these things that across the country, apartments, A-class apartments in St. Pete, stuff in Phoenix, Dallas, ATM machines, I mean, new builds, triple net commercial. And so, yeah, like I became addicted to the type of returns I could achieve in active ownership. And I thought that because they're telling me, oh, it's going to happen. They're telling me they can hit 24, 26, 28% IRR in these private investments. Well, that's what I'm used to seeing in terms of cap rates here in Ohio for single family. Yeah, let's do that. And yeah, I mean, I pushed a lot of money, just continually 50, 100 grand a month for 3 years into the private space. And then started to see that I went with a lot of fraudulent, schemy, bad business model characters that all kind of came crashing in a 18-month period of Ponzi schemes and fraud and just bad business models based on interest rates staying back at 3-4% like they were. And so now capital calls, hey, you got to wire $80,000 or you're going to get unknown dilution percentage in 2 weeks. And like, how do you not send that, like an unknown dilution? So yeah, so that's what put me and yeah, back to my bread and butter, direct active owned real estate. And I talked about this in my presentation, right? The lion and the field mouse, right? And yeah, okay, I'm not hunting gazelles anymore. I'm back to these field mice, but it's they're never going to go to zero. I mean, they're always going to cash flow here. I know it. I know how to do it passively with a purchase option program, and the tenants can stay there forever. I don't ever push anybody out. And it's nice and easy. And I'm at least going to be back to doing that until I feel I've made up for, a chunk, if not all of these passive things that have gone south. And time will tell whether the other 20 syndications make up for the 4 or 5 bad ones, once everything's run full circle. And maybe I'll be like, yeah, okay, I had some heartburn, but the other ones, made up for it. And I got to live much more of my passive income life than had I been like my buddy and went from 40 houses to 100 houses like he has now. And he's busy. He's busy managing 100 houses.
Yeah. So, what do you think the bigger lesson for you was in all this? Is it judgment of character? Is it analysis of opportunity, or do you think it's a combo?
I mean, there's definitely hindsights of character. right? There's a common theme amongst, two of the individuals that caused me a lot of heartburn and some losses. Um,
And what was that like for people watching? How could they potentially see that in front of them?
I mean, sales guys, salesy, everything. Oh, awesome. We're going to do amazing. We're doing this. We're doing this. We're doing this. And we're going to do this. And just that rocket ship, right? I make fun of them, right? The rocket ship guys and the guys all over posting all that stuff, the muscle and up and those guys I run from now, because the ones that's the common theme of the two that caused me a lot of pain and stress. And then I mean the two others in the private equity space. I mean, the one we vetted out, they've been around for 4 or 5 years. We talked to investors that had been with them the whole time. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what hindsight we would have done differently there. And yeah, it
One
was
thing
a
I'm
Ponzi
hearing,
scheme.
do you think you could have asked them about failures and see how they responded? That's something I've tried to test doing recently, where I think everyone has failures. And I'm not necessarily listening for what the failure is, but more of is there a denial of talking about it? And there's been a
Mhm.
couple people that I've had do that to me where it actually very much helped because they're like, "Hey, what have you messed up?" And when I was honest with them, they were basically just like asking, "We just wanted to know that you would tell us because if you said you're perfect, then we probably aren't going to work with you."
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think I've asked some of the apartment operators on what could go wrong. This one I was mentioning earlier was in the oil and gas space, and they were supposedly, they had pictures of all the equipment that they were selling to Exxon Mobil for carbon sequestration, of removing carbon from wells to extract it and make the wells more efficient. And I mean, we talked to lots of people and everybody kind of knew this guy. And then next thing you know, like my round of funding was like the last round of funding that the SEC was watching. And they watched the funds come in, they watched it get split out and sent to other people as distributions, and they locked it all down. And so now we just sit and wait and watch these attorneys and the SEC just burn up all the money that they found, while they're burning it up in legal costs. And we'll see what pennies on the dollar come out of it.
And do you think this has made you look at, let's call it just the system differently? Because obviously you were in the corporate system, you kind of saw the back end of that. Now you've been in these bigger investments on the side of, oh, I'm going to make money. Now you're not only seeing how the investments were wrong, but you're seeing, oh, the system is now flawed to where I, the guy taking the risk, I'm probably not going to get the money. Like, how much has changed just about how the world works since you've kind of made this huge shift in your life?
I mean, now I want control, so I'm buying my own deals, and I will put money with like very close friends and people I know, operators in the private space that I've been with for 4 years that I know are doing the right things. I am not shopping on Real Crowd for syndications anymore, or entertaining really anything. I mean, I'm just keeping it tight. I'm not giving my money out there for anything risky anymore, and just going to go back to the bread and butter stuff that people, that's the funny thing is, oh, okay, yeah, you own Akron, Canton, Northeast Ohio, single families, but oh man, you're invested in a winery, a resort. They think those things are amazing, when it's like, no, I'll trade it. I'll trade that for two more Akron single families. And it's not sexy, but if something cash flows and is safe, don't worry about the what it looks like to others.
And I think this is kind of a unique transition I want to talk to you about is that approach of let's just take care of what I know works and make a system out of it allows you to go, I would call it, do experiences that do fit that box of this is fun, this is a lifestyle thing that people want to have. So I know that's a huge element about you that I don't know if I've heard you talk about too much, but how important do you think just actually traveling and having fun is to be successful?
um I don't know, as far as a requirement to be successful. I think one thing that I did that I know some folks aren't doing is setting goals and rewarding yourself when you hit those. So, my rewards, Generally kind of, or kind of superficial, but like, a watch guy, right? So, hey, when I get 30 houses, I'm buying a Rolex. When I hit 35 houses, I'm going to get this Porsche Macan Turbo. When I hit 40 houses, and, Tim Shiner has a good book, 50 Things They Didn't Teach You in High School or in school, something like that. And one of the things I heard when he was on a podcast was he was huge on goal setting. Like, you have to set your goals and you got to reward yourself. And don't hit that goal and be like, oh, I can't justify spending 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 on this. He's like, absolutely, you have to do that. Create your goals, hit your targets, reward yourself, and then involve your significant other. I think I forget what he said to his wife, but he said something like, hey, every time I buy a house, I'm going to give you $1,000 or something like this to his wife or something. And boom, that got her real interested in the business and what he was doing. And that got her helping look for properties or something. And so if your significant other isn't involved in your business, try to figure out how to get them to understand the rewards of what's happening and what's being done. And yeah, I mean, so in terms of like that alignment, I think that was something you got to do. But today, I mean, now, right, I got those things in place, and my lifestyle just needs travel, needs different things. And that's why I get on a plane 20 sometimes a year to go to different events, conferences, to get guys and go out west golfing, to go down to my place in Florida, to go visit Accountable Equity, the golf course resort I'm invested in, to go with my partner that does the international stuff, to go to Costa Rica, to go to St. Croix. I just love that because, I can still be working, I can still be, connecting. And that's, the more places I get like that, you're getting in the right room, right, to make more connections.
Yeah. Yeah, because network is a very interesting thing to me. I started doing it solely because I had a few clients that hosted networking events. And, Katie can attest, I used to chicken out all the time. She'd be like, don't you have an event at 5 o'clock? And I'd be like, no, 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 that's not tonight. And then she'd check and be like, yeah, it is. And so I was always nervous to go to them. And then I would kind of self sabotage out of it. But then finally, I just kind of told myself, everyone's going to be nervous because no one does know each other. So, were you always social in, let's say, your entire career, or did you have to get over that hurdle too of like, okay, I am going to go to these things and I'm actually going to talk to people?
So I've done a 360 and another 360 or something. So I was active. I was an extrovert. I was kind of goofy and overly social in early 20s into 30s. And yep, kept that and was very, very busy as I'm working full time. And I got 17 engineers and 7 plants around the country. And I'm jumping on planes to go to plants, and I'm buying a rental a month. For 2 years, I was buying one a month. And I've got 2 kids, right? A toddler and an infant, or 2 toddlers and a wife, and we're building houses or buying. And so I was crazy, go, 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 go. And then when it finally, right, I finally got let go that last time in 2019, and my job was eliminated. And it was a far different experience when you have 55 rentals and hard money loans and private equity. And now you got, 100 legs under the table. And it's like, oh, I didn't even notice that W-2 paycheck anyhow when it got deposited. I didn't know what that was. But so when that happened, I don't know what switch this was, but I became so protective of my time. Like, I used to manage a calendar that was double booked and triple booked with W-2, and then I'm leaving from here. I'm going to an event. I'm going to look at a house. So there's dinner. There's dinner with my buddies and coming home to see the kids and this and that. And when that happened, I just became so protective of my calendar. And what else happened? 9 months, 12 months later, COVID. And so COVID hits, and I spent, this was where I was at all day, sitting in this office, right? Now, but I'm watching, I got TV here on this MacBook, so I got TV in here. And I just felt like I can't go and sit on the couch all day, but at least in here, I wasn't being lazy, I guess. So I'd be in here, and then, I don't know, golf, and then, do whatever. And then I would go down in the theater at night, and I joke around that I found the end of Netflix, And it was a movie called Pastor about a pastor with a stripper, and he gets bit and he turns into a dinosaur. And it's such a horrible movie, but I sent it out to my buddies. I'm like, hey, I found the end of Netflix here, Pastor. But I turned very introverted from just for some reason becoming so protective of my time, and just like COVID. And so I just flipped this complete other way and just kind of focused on the business. And that's why coming out of COVID, and I start to connect with folks at RubeCon mostly, and I connect with these folks that bring me on their podcast, and they're like, why aren't you podcasting? Why aren't you coaching? And I'm like, no, that's not for me. It sounds like a job. It sounds like work. It sounds like I got to commit to things. And it sounds like I mean, I don't talk in front of a camera, or, I mean, I don't know who wants to listen to me. Like, and it was all these kind of limiting beliefs and these things, just not wanting to have a small life, but that's what it was. It was having a small life, being introverted in my office and in my little realm. And it took, a couple of those people that just constantly kept pushing me, that are living big lives, that built a life on real estate and then became big in coaching and influencing and teaching and connecting. And it took a lot of them just continuing to beat into me, and then a mastermind in last October with Dustin and a bunch of more advanced folks. And we did this life wheel exercise that just smacked me in the face of, yeah, you rated yourself a 4 in contribution because, yeah, you're not doing anything to develop others, to help others, to change, to grow your network. And, that was kind of the tipping point, or at least the start of the tipping point, for when Dustin texted me and asked me if I'd come speak at RubeCon 3. And, I looked at my calendar and I was like, oh, I'm going to Costa Rica with the, investor group. And then I'm going to Florida. Like, I'd have to squeeze this in between. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't even want to go do that. And then before I hit send, I was like, Zach, quit doing the same thing. Like, just goof off all winter and summer, and not go try to create a bigger life through influencing, teaching, coaching, and grow a network. And so that's what started everything, and put me to work for basically like 2 months of getting a presentation together that was flowing, and really communicating what my life is, and opening up, the business, the passive income life, and the podcast, and the coaching group. And it's, I remember my wife saying, like, you've been working more in the last 2 months than you have the last 4 years. And I'm like, yeah, it's actually a lot to do all these things, and get it all done in a tight time period so that it kind of makes sense. And it's been good. It's been definitely more gratifying than buying a rental.
And do you think that there's maybe not a passive versus active, but is it interesting for you, now that your network has grown, to see how at a certain point it kind of builds its own equity too, where people start connecting you in the background, and then you just show up in a group text and you're like, oh, I didn't create that, but work I did 3 months ago did.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's still the one thing I like about what I'm doing here with the website, the podcast, the coaching group. It still, to me, feels like it is spending my time for chickens, not an egg. Right. By building these things up, these are things that continue, they grow, they multiply, they get tentacles. It's not that, when I create that podcast is out there forever. Right. And it can be shared and people can find it. It's not that I made this thing and sent it out there and it was listed like a Snapchat or something, right? Like, it was created and then it's gone. Right. I wouldn't put my efforts into, like, that's why I don't flip houses, because if I'm going to spend my time and energy, I don't just want an egg. That's why I buy rentals, because I want that paying me every month for years and years and years. And that's what I like about what I'm doing with the coaching group and the podcast and the website and everything, is it's building upon things that are there, that will always be there.
And does it feel exciting to you to think about how many people could be in, let's call it, the Zach Zimmer community over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and realizing like there might be a younger version of you right now who maybe he's doing a calling job and he hates it, or he's still at his corporate job. He's been watching Bigger Pockets, and he might listen to a podcast or two.
I mean, honestly, I haven't really thought about it because it's almost like me in 2012 or 13 with rentals. I just can't, you couldn't envision, back then I thought it was going to provide $500 a month in cash flow for me and my wife's nights out, right? Our weekends out. And in 18 years, I'm going to sell those two properties and it's going to pay for half or all of college for my daughter, right? No idea that this thing could become a snowball that buys us a place in Florida that gives us all, cars, houses, vacations, and we live off of. So I guess the monetary thing is very different with what I'm doing now. It's you're not getting paid, but I don't know. Now I'm getting one or two texts or emails a week. Like, could I be getting 5 or 10 a day of new connections? Oh man, I really appreciate this podcast. It really hit me. Similar message to what I sent out today about an episode of a guy I listened to who his episode today was about, rethinking the cheap seats. Don't stay in the cheap seats. And, his lesson, which really hits home for me, is like, when he went to a big tournament, a big pickleball national championships, and he was buying tickets and he's like, okay, yeah, these seats are $40. And then he comes across the VIP lounge and he's like, oh man, $250 a piece. And I'm buying 5 tickets. Like, well, he justified it. And in the VIP lounge, he connects with a guy who owns one of the teams there. And he likes his, he's talking to him about real estate. And next thing, this guy, hey, do you guys want to go to these practice courts in this Coliseum? And we'll play with some of these players. And they're playing with some of the players. They're getting autographed paddles. And then he's like, hey, this guy's a tester for the best paddles in the world. Here, have a whole bunch of the best paddles in the world. Like, and so his lessons, like same thing with flying economy or coach versus first class. Like, do you ever think you'll have a mind-changing conversation back in coach?
No.
Now, I don't want to put down people in coach, but like you have a much higher likelihood of sitting next to someone who is living a big life, running businesses, influencing people's lives, changing people, changing something up in first class than you do of an economy. And so that's where he's like, hey, don't pick the cheap seats. And I was like, yeah, that's me. I'm always, how do you save? How do you save? Do I really have to do that? Instead of like, hey, I know I'm not going to have, a similar opportunity sitting in these seats that I might have in these seats, right? Getting in the right room.
Yeah. So you maybe changed your access or changed your mindset on paying for access, meaning just go to the fun events, go to the big things, because yeah, you have to look at it like, oh, I'm paying to be around people, but there's kind of this group collection where it's like, hey, we all agreed to do this, so now we all get to have this experience together.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So
What are you most excited for as you head into the future? I got to ask you. So like right now, obviously, because I would say you've got, the chickens are working, they're making their eggs. What do you look forward to and what excites you every day?
What excites me every day? I mean, a lot of my focus now is in the health space. So that pivoted, like a lot of the podcasts have pivoted the last 2 3 years, and these are business podcasts or purposeful life living podcasts, and they started bringing in the proactive health doctors. And so I've been very much focused on diet, nutrition, supplementation, grounding mats, infrared therapy, peptides. I mean, all these things to make sure to live the healthiest, longest life that I can. So I mean, stuff like that interests me. Planning the trips for the family. I'm always like, okay, what's the next one? Because I don't, I want stuff booked 6 months out. So I'm always 6 months out. What's the next thing we're getting in schedule? And how do I book it the cheapest, the most economical way? So I need to rethink some of those. But in terms of like business, I mean, it's really the brand, right? The passive income life, and trying to build that and influence that, get the podcast, grow that, connect with folks. And In terms of real estate, it'll just be what comes. It's not something I am adamantly, aggressively spending time. I'm not sending out mailers. Last year I went at it pretty passively and still added about 4,000 a month in net income, just by buying 5 properties. And then we flipped the apartments that cleared a couple 100,000. So just doing things, it's almost like my exercise routine. It's kind of on autopilot. So I do it every day. I have my rotation. To me, my real estate business is very much kind of an autopilot. I'm already at FI. Buying another house is not something that's going to give me any more gratification. But when opportunities come along to build my legacy, my net worth, to make sure that there's just plenty of assets so that my girls never have to choose a profession for the money, right? I mean, that's probably a big goal for them, is that they're taken care of and get to choose what they want to do after I've instilled good work ethic in them,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we've got to instill that, but that they're not going into a 9 to 5 that they don't like. That, one of them loves animals, right? Okay, yep. Do you want to be a vet tech? Do you want to go to school and actually be a vet? You won't have to worry about, even a vet, I don't know what a vet makes, maybe 150,000 or something, but you'll have the income and the assets to live pretty much whatever you want to do and still serve animals. And so, yeah, I mean, and I want to keep building that legacy. But in terms of us, like, we have what we need. We've got a great house and we've got a great place for the winter in Florida. And, I just want to keep building my legacy for them and making sure to never buy myself a job. So if I'm gonna own an asset, it better be passive and it better cash flow my required returns, but not to go buy a job.
Yeah. Fair. All right. Well, I want to thank you. I think we're going to probably have another episode, but yeah, for everyone out there, let's say maybe they do want to ask for that help or they don't know who to get information from. How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so it's real, REAL, real Zach, ZACH Zimmer, ZIMMER, realzachzimmer.com. My podcast is on iTunes and Spotify, The Passive Income Life, 7-Figure Investing, Zach Zimmer. They can also find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and you can email me, zach@realzachzimmer.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, I want to say thank you and I really appreciate you coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was fun.